The empty playground. The rhythmic thud of my feet against the cracked pavement was the only sound that dared to pierce the suffocating silence of the night. Streetlights cast a sickly yellow glow on the deserted sidewalks, highlighting the graffiti scrawled across abandoned buildings. It was the kind of quiet that pressed against your eardrums, a silence so profound it felt almost sinister. I loved running at night. The world seemed different, somehow stripped bare. The usual worries that gnawed at me during the day faded into the darkness, replaced by a strange sense of clarity. It was my time, my escape. Tonight, however, the usual peace was absent. An unsettling prickling crawled up my spine, a feeling I couldn't quite place. I dismissed it as fatigue. I'd been pushing myself lately, aiming for a longer distance each time. Glancing at my watch, I decided on one more loop around the park before heading home. The park was usually deserted at this hour, a vast expanse of looming trees and empty benches bathed in an eerie moonlight. But tonight, something was different. A faint glow emanated from the far end of the park, illuminating a sliver of the children's playground. Curiosity tugged at me. The park was locked after sunset. Who could be there? As I approached, the unsettling feeling intensified. The air hung heavy, thick with anticipation. The faint glow I'd seen earlier seemed to pulsate, originating not from a source, but from within the playground itself. The swings swayed back and forth in a rhythmic creak, despite the complete lack of wind. My heart hammered a frantic tattoo against my ribs. But before I could turn back, a sound stopped me in my tracks. A soft, high-pitched giggle, tinkling through the night air. It was the kind of sound that belonged to a child, innocent and carefree. Yet in the absolute stillness of the park, it sent a shiver down my spine. I squinted through the darkness, my eyes scanning the playground equipment. The seesaw teetered up and down with an impossible momentum. Silhouettes flitted in and out of view on the brightly illuminated slide, too fast for me to discern any details. "Hello?" My voice came out in a choked whisper. It sounded alien in the oppressive silence. The laughter died abruptly. The playground froze. The swaying swings, the teetering seesaw, all fell still. But the oppressive, expectant silence remained. I took a hesitant step forward, my breath catching in my throat. Then a whisper. It came from somewhere behind the climbing frame, a hushed voice like dry leaves rustling in the wind. It spoke in a language I couldn't understand, a guttural murmur that sent shivers down my spine. I couldn't make out the words, but the raw, primal fear they carried was unmistakable. Panic clawed at my throat. I spun on my heel, the image of fleeting shadows and the chilling whisper fueling my desperate sprint. My breaths came in ragged gasps, the sound of my pounding heart a drumbeat in my ears. I didn't stop running until I burst through my front door, slamming it shut behind me. Leaning against the cold wood, I gulped for air, the echo of the playground silence still ringing in my ears. Had I imagined it all? The laughter, the whispers, the shadows that danced just beyond the edge of my vision? The next morning, driven by a morbid curiosity, I decided to confront the playground in the light of day. But as I rounded the corner, a pang of disappointment washed over me. The climbing frame stood sentinel, bathed in the warm glow of the morning sun. The swings hung limp, the seesaw balanced precariously. There was no evidence of the bizarre events of the previous night. Everything seemed perfectly normal, almost. A chill danced down my spine as I noticed a single red rubber ball nestled at the base of the slide. It was worn and dirty, but a single word was scrawled across its surface in what looked like faded, peeling paint. "Welcome." My initial skepticism melted away. The word wasn't there yesterday. It couldn't have been. A cold dread settled in the pit of my stomach. I knew with a chilling certainty that whatever I'd encountered on the playground wasn't a product of fatigue or my overactive imagination. Over the next few days, a strange pattern emerged. Every night, at precisely the same time, the unsettling feeling would return, pulling me towards the park. An invisible force seemed to compel me to witness the bizarre spectacle on the playground once more. Each night the activity intensified. The laughter grew louder, more manic. The shadows on the slide became bolder, more defined, but I could never quite make out their form. The whispers morphed, twisting into a cacophony of languages, none of them human. My fear kept me rooted to the spot, a terrified voyeur to this unseen spectacle. Then, on the 5th night, something changed. As I crept closer, the laughter died down. An unnatural stillness settled on the playground, broken only by the rasping chirp of crickets. In the heart of the illuminated circle, the swings began to move again. Not with their usual slow creak, but with a violent, chaotic jerk. They swayed wildly, twisting in an impossible manner, the chains groaning in protest. Suddenly, a figure materialized on the middle seat. It wasn't a child, not in the way I understood it. It was a grotesque parody of one, impossibly thin with limbs like twisted branches. Its head lolled at an unnatural angle, the face obscured by a mask of shadows. It wore a grotesquely oversized shirt and pants, the fabric flapping wildly as the swing went berserk. Terror choked the scream that threatened to erupt from my throat. I wanted to run, but my legs were frozen in place. The figure on the swing turned its head in my direction, a chilling crack echoing in the night air. There were no eyes in the shadowed face, but a pair of glowing red orbs that sent a primal terror through me. It spoke then, in that same guttural whisper I'd heard before, but this time the words were clear, dripping with a perverse amusement.
"We see you,"
it rasped. Its voice seemed to crackle through the air, resonating in my bones.
"Come play."
The red orbs flickered, burning into my very soul. I couldn't take it anymore. With a strangled cry, I tore my gaze away and bolted. The sound of the swings creaking after me fueled my desperate sprint. That night a fever gripped me. Nightmares plagued my sleep, visions of shadowy figures and distorted laughter filling my dreams. My sanity felt like a fragile raft lost in a raging storm. Days turned into weeks. I couldn't bring myself to return to the park, haunted by the memory of the creature and its chilling invitation. But the nightmares persisted, and with them, a strange compulsion, an undeniable pull towards the playground, a morbid curiosity that gnawed at me like a ravenous beast. One night, under the pale glow of a nearly full moon, I succumbed. I found myself drawn to the park once more, drawn to the unsettling glow emanating from the playground. As I approached, a cold sweat slicked my skin. The red rubber ball with the faded word "welcome" lay nestled at the base of the slide, a mocking reminder of my previous encounter. This time, however, the playground was empty. The laughter and whispers were absent. There was only an unsettling stillness that pressed upon me. But as I drew closer, a flicker of movement in the corner of my eye made me freeze. A single swing at the far end was moving ever so slightly, back and forth, barely perceptible, like a metronome counting down the seconds to something terrible. Panic clawed at my throat. I was about to turn and run when a voice, cold and raspy, filled the air.
"We knew you'd return."
It came from all around me, echoing from the trees, the benches, the very fabric of the night. Fear choked my breath, paralyzing me with its icy grip.
"The game isn't over yet."
The voice continued, a chorus of whispers forming the sentence.
"There's room for one more."
The single swing began to swing faster, its creaking echoing ominously in the silence. As I watched, horrified, a figure materialized on the seat. It was the same grotesque creature from before, its red eyes burning into mine. This time, however, it wasn't alone. More shadowy figures materialized on the other swings, their faces obscured, their laughter a chilling melody that seemed to burrow into my skull. They were beckoning me, and in a moment of horrifying clarity, I knew this wasn't a game. This wasn't a place of childhood joy. It was a place of hungry shadows, a gateway to something dark and ancient. It was a place I wouldn't escape alive. With a desperate cry, I turned and ran. But as I fled, a chilling realization washed over me. The red rubber ball with the faded inscription wasn't alone anymore. Beside it, nestled at the base of the slide, lay another ball, identical in every way but with a new message scrawled upon its surface in the same faded paint.
You're next.
The recurring dream. The crisp mountain air bit at Sarah's cheeks as she surveyed the weathered cabin. Nestled deep within Redwood National Park, it was an unexpected inheritance from a distant relative. Her brother Ethan whistled cheerfully, already exploring the creaky porch. Her parents' faces, bright with excitement, were busy unloading the car. Only Sarah felt a prickle of unease. The first few days were idyllic. The silence was broken only by the rustle of leaves and the chatter of unseen birds. Sunlight dappled through the ancient redwoods, casting an ethereal glow over the clearing. At night, the stars seemed impossibly close, a vast, shimmering expanse. But on the third night, Sarah woke with a gasp. Heart pounding, she sat up in bed, the dream clinging to her like cobwebs. It had been so vivid. She'd been standing on the edge of a dense forest, a suffocating darkness pressing in. A low, guttural moan vibrated through the ground, sending shivers down her spine. In the following weeks, the dream repeated, growing more detailed each time. She explored the dark forest, the gnarled branches reaching for her, the unseen presence always just out of sight. It emanated a cold dread, a feeling of pure malice. During the day, she dismissed the dreams as her overactive imagination. The cabin, though remote, was peaceful. They explored hidden waterfalls, hiked through trails carpeted with ferns, and spent evenings playing board games by the crackling fireplace. Yet, a subtle change crept into the atmosphere. The whispers in the wind seemed to hold an edge, the rustle of leaves like hushed voices. One blustery evening, Ethan announced, "Hey, I found an old logbook in the attic." Their parents gathered around as Ethan opened the leather-bound book. It was filled with faded entries, mostly observations about weather and wildlife. But on the last page there was a chilling sketch, a monstrous figure with glowing eyes emerging from the forest. Beneath it, a single line in spidery handwriting: "Beware the shadow that creeps." A cold draft swirled around them, extinguishing the fire. Sarah shivered, a deep sense of dread settling in her gut. The dream. It wasn't just a dream. It was a warning. Over the next few days, the occurrences intensified. Strange noises echoed through the cabin at night, and objects went missing and reappeared in different places. One morning, she found a pentagram scratched into the bark of a nearby redwood. Panic gnawed at her. One particularly unsettling moment came during their evening walk. They were on a familiar trail when Sarah noticed a dark, swirling mist gathering between the towering trees. Panic seized her. It looked just like the darkness from her dreams. "Guys," she whispered, her voice trembling, "look." They followed her gaze but saw nothing. "Sarah, there's nothing there," her mother said gently. "But the mist, you didn't see it?" They brushed it off, attributing it to her heightened state of anxiety. But doubt gnawed at Sarah. Was she losing her mind, or was something truly sinister lurking in the woods? Driven by desperation, she started researching local folklore. In the dusty archives of a nearby town library, she stumbled upon an old legend. It spoke of a malevolent entity imprisoned within the forest, a shadow creature that fed on fear. The legend mentioned a ritual that could banish it, requiring a specific symbol drawn in the moonlight. Back at the cabin, Sarah spent the night tracing the symbol from the library's archive onto a large piece of bark. Exhausted and scared, she slept. The dream came again, more vivid than ever. But this time she wasn't alone. The darkness coalesced into the monstrous figure from the logbook sketch. Its red eyes glowed with malevolent hunger. "You cannot escape me," it rasped in a voice like dry leaves scraping against stone. Sarah held up the bark with the symbol etched onto it. As the moonlight streamed through the trees, Bathing the creature in its glow, it recoiled with a shrill, inhuman shriek. Then, with a pop, it vanished. Sarah woke with a jolt, her heart hammering against her ribs. The moonlight cast a silvery sheen across the cabin. It was real. The encounter, the ritual, it had all been real. The next few days were filled with anxious waiting. The house remained eerily quiet. Sleep came easier, without the terror of the recurring dream. Hope flickered in Sarah's chest. Then, on the night before their departure, a low, guttural moan vibrated through the cabin. It came not from their surroundings, but from within. The moan originated from her father's room. Panic surged through Sarah. Her mind raced, piecing together the terrifying realization. It wasn't the forest entity that had plagued her dreams. It was the other way around. The creature had used the forest, with its darkness and isolation, as a conduit to reach out, to find a host. Adrenaline masking her fear, Sarah grabbed a heavy iron poker from the fireplace and raced towards her parents' room. Ethan and her mother were huddled by the door, faces pale and drawn.
"Stay here," Sarah whispered, her voice surprisingly steady.
She pushed open the creaky door. Dust motes danced in the moonlight filtering through the window. Her father lay on the bed, his face contorted in pain, his eyes glowing a malevolent red, mirroring the creatures in her dreams. As Sarah approached, he spoke, but it wasn't her father's voice. It was the creature's, rough and gravelly. "You think you've won, child? I merely shifted vessels. This one is stronger, riper with fear." Sarah's grip tightened on the poker. "Leave him alone! Get out!" A guttural laugh echoed in the room. "You cannot banish me again. This time I will claim this body and make this place my home." Terror threatened to consume Sarah, but the thought of her father spurred her on. This wasn't a monster to be subdued with a lullaby. It was a predator to be outsmarted. Fear was its weapon, but maybe, just maybe, there was another way. Taking a deep breath, she steeled herself. She wouldn't let fear be her father's prison. Focus flooded her mind. Images from the library's archive flickered through her memory. The legend's mention of a symbol, the creature's aversion to moonlight. With a surge of determination, she grabbed a nearby lantern and smashed it on the floor, bathing the room in a sudden flickering glow. Her father flinched, a flicker of recognition battling the creature's control in his eyes. Seizing the opportunity, Sarah yelled, "Look at the window, Dad! The moon! Remember the cabin, the forest!" Her words struck a chord. Her father's body tensed, then convulsed. A guttural growl ripped from his throat as he fought against the entity's hold. The red glow in his eyes flickered, dimmed, then vanished entirely. With a gasp, her father's eyes fluttered open. Disorientation clouded his gaze, but slowly, recognition dawned. "Sarah?" he rasped, his voice weak. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. Relief washed over her, so intense it almost knocked her off her feet. "Dad? You're okay?" He blinked, regaining focus. What happened?" Ethan and her mother, who had followed Sarah into the room, rushed to his side. The creature was gone. The oppressive atmosphere had lifted, replaced by a fragile sense of normalcy. They spent the rest of the night huddled together, the events replaying in their minds. In the pale light of dawn, they made a decision. They wouldn't stay. This cabin, once a symbol of new beginnings, had become a battleground. Leaving the redwoods behind wasn't easy. A part of Sarah ached for the tranquility she'd first envisioned, but a deeper sense of resolve dominated. They had faced something terrifying and emerged stronger, a family bound by a shared experience. Back in the city, life resumed its familiar rhythm, but the experience left its mark. They kept the logbook, a tangible reminder of their encounter. The forest held a different kind of beauty now, a beauty tinged with a newfound respect for the unseen. Years later, Sarah stood on her balcony, gazing at the twinkling cityscape. The memory of the recurring dream, once a source of terror, now held a different weight. It was a reminder of her courage, a courage born out of love and a desperate fight for her family. The world might hold unexplained encounters, but she knew, with a newfound certainty, that she wouldn't face them alone.
The white noise. The rustle of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl formed the soundtrack to their first night under the canvas canopy. 4 friends, Maya, the self-proclaimed leader, Liam, the quiet observer, Sarah, the pragmatist, and Ethan, the resident jokester, huddled around the crackling campfire, their faces glowing in the golden light. Laughter mingled with the pops and sizzles of burning logs as they recounted past camping trips, each embellished with a touch of exaggeration for comedic effect. As the fire dwindled, Liam adjusted the dial on his old transistor radio. Instead of the usual static, a soft, high-pitched whine filled the air. They exchanged confused glances. Maya leaned over. "Sounds like someone's trying to tune in a dead channel." Liam fiddled with the dial again, the noise fluctuating before settling into a steady white hiss. It wasn't unpleasant, but undeniably eerie. A shiver ran down Sarah's spine. "Maybe it's a local radio station messing with tourists," she suggested, trying to sound nonchalant. Ethan, ever the optimist, chuckled. "Ghostly pranksters more likely. This place does have its fair share of creepy legends, doesn't it?" He winked at Maya, referring to the local tale of a lost gold mine guarded by a spectral prospector. Ignoring him, Maya grabbed her phone. "Let's see if there's any signal." Her frustration was evident when the screen displayed a single sad bar. "Great. No way to check if other stations are experiencing this." The white noise continued throughout the night, a constant, unsettling presence. Sleep came in fits and starts, punctuated by unsettling dreams. In the morning, the radio remained stuck on the same channel. A sense of unease grew as they packed up camp. Their hike took them deeper into the woods, the air thick with the scent of pines and damp earth. Liam, usually at the front of the group, lingered behind, his gaze fixed on the dense undergrowth. Maya noticed his pale face. "You okay, Liam?" He shook his head. "Just feel like we're being watched." The others exchanged uneasy glances. The playful banter of the previous day had been replaced by a tense silence. As they rounded a bend in the trail, a peculiar sight greeted them. A lone deer stood frozen in a clearing, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. Its eyes, usually large and inquisitive, were vacant, glazed over. Sarah pointed, her voice a raspy whisper. "Look at its eyes." Before they could react, the deer bolted, crashing through the undergrowth with an unnatural speed. A collective gasp escaped their lips. Ethan, usually the voice of reason, looked genuinely scared. What the heck was that? They continued on, their pace quickened by a newfound urgency. The white noise on the radio seemed to intensify, like a static warning of unseen dangers. Around noon, they stumbled upon another anomaly. A stream, usually lively and gurgling, lay silent, its surface smooth as glass, reflecting the distorted image of the trees above. Sarah knelt beside the stream bed. "This doesn't make sense. Where's the water gone?" Panic flickered in her eyes. Liam, uncharacteristically bold, stepped forward. "We need to get out of here." He pointed in the direction they came. Their trek back felt like an eternity. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig sent shivers down their spines. The oppressive silence of the forest, broken only by the relentless white noise, amplified their anxiety. Just as exhaustion threatened to overwhelm them, they emerged from the trees. Relief flooded Maya as she saw the familiar sight of their campsite. But something was wrong. Their belongings were strewn around, ripped and torn as if by a wild animal. Fear turned to anger. It had to be a prank. Who would be so cruel? Ethan, his face pale, pointed towards the radio. It lay on the ground, its plastic casing cracked, revealing a mess of melted wires and scorch marks. The white noise had become a rhythmic, buzzing screech. A loud crack echoed through the woods, followed by a low rumble. The ground trembled beneath their feet. Before they could react, the air shimmered, and a blinding white light erupted, engulfing the clearing. When the light subsided, the world seemed to have shifted on its axis. The familiar woods were gone, replaced by a desolate landscape. Stark gray trees stood skeletal against a milky white sky. The air crackled with a faint electrical hum. Terror welled up in Maya's chest. Their prank theory lay shattered. This was something far more terrifying, something they couldn't explain. The white noise had become a constant thrumming in their ears, a never-ending reminder of their predicament. They huddled together. The white noise, now a constant thrumming in their ears, felt like a physical pressure pushing down on them. Fear threatened to paralyze them, but Sarah, ever the pragmatist, forced herself to act. "We need a plan. Staying here is pointless." Liam, usually quiet, spoke up. "The light. It changed everything. Do you think we're in some kind of alternate dimension?" The concept hung in the air, heavy and terrifying. Ethan, despite the grim situation, managed a weak joke. "Well, if this is some alternate reality game gone wrong, the graphics are pretty messed up." His attempt at humor landed flat, but it served to break the tension momentarily. Maya took charge. "We need to find shelter and water. We can figure out the rest later." Scanning the desolate landscape, she spotted a cluster of gray rocks in the distance, offering a sliver of hope. The trek was arduous. The air itself felt heavy, their lungs straining to pull in enough oxygen. The gray trees blurred by as they walked, their conversation limited to desperate gasps for breath. Finally, they reached the rocks, forming a small cave-like opening. It wasn't much, but it offered some protection from the harsh environment. Curled up inside, they huddled together for warmth. Sarah, ever practical, rationed the meager water they had left in their water bottles. The silence, broken only by the faint hum in their ears, was deafening. As darkness fell, the milky white sky above transitioned to a swirling mass of purple and green hues, an unsettling light show, devoid of stars. They huddled closer, a sense of deep loneliness gnawing at them. Fear was a tangible presence, a cold hand gripping their hearts. Nightmares plagued their sleep. Maya dreamt of a white void filled with a deafening white noise. Sarah dreamt of the vacant eyes of the deer staring back at her. When they woke, they were no closer to understanding what had happened or how to escape. Suddenly, Liam broke the oppressive silence. "Did you hear that?" He pointed towards the back of the cave. A faint scratching sound emerged from the darkness. Their hearts pounded in unison. Ethan, despite his fear, grabbed a branch, his makeshift weapon trembling in his hand. "Stay together," Maya whispered, her voice barely audible. The scratching grew louder, accompanied by rhythmic clicks and whimpers. A creature emerged from the shadows. Tall and skeletal, it resembled a human, but was twisted and malformed. Its skin was a sickly gray, and its eyes glowed with an eerie white light. It let out a guttural screech, the sound echoing through the cave. Panic surged through them. They scrambled backwards, bumping into each other in their haste to escape. But the creature was faster. It lunged at Ethan, its bony claws tearing through his clothes. A scream pierced the silence. Sarah reacted instinctively, grabbing a rock and slamming it down on the creature's head. It recoiled with a shrill shriek before disappearing back into the darkness. Ethan lay on the ground, clutching his arm, a red stain spreading on his shirt. Adrenaline coursed through their veins, fueling a desperate need for action. They knew they couldn't stay here. "We have to keep moving," Maya said, her voice hoarse with fear and determination. "We need to find a way out of this place." Sarah helped her friend up, supporting his weight. They knew they were no match for the creatures, but they had to try. Emerging from the cave, they were greeted by a sight that both terrified and intrigued them. In the distance, a faint shimmering line separated the desolate landscape from what seemed like a normal forest. The trees were green again, the sky a clear blue, It was a beacon of hope in a hopeless situation. With renewed purpose, they stumbled towards the shimmering line. The white noise in their ears seemed to intensify as they neared it. Just as they reached the edge, the ground beneath them began to vibrate. The creature from the cave reappeared, snapping at their heels. Fear lent them unnatural strength. With a desperate surge of energy, they crossed the shimmering line. There was a blinding flash of white light, followed by an ear-splitting crash. When they finally opened their eyes, the desolate landscape was gone. They were back in their campsite. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the clearing. The ripped and torn state of their belongings was a stark reminder of the horrors they had experienced. Ethan, still clutching his arm, looked around in disbelief. We made it back? Sarah knelt beside him, examining his wound. It wasn't deep, just a scratch. Puzzlement etched lines on her face. Did it all just seem like a bad dream? Liam shook his head, staring vacantly at the sky. No dream. It was real. The creatures, the white noise, the strange lights. He finished with a shudder. Maya picked up the mangled radio. The white noise had vanished, replaced with the usual static. Was it all just a collective hallucination? The question hung heavy in the air, unanswered. An unsettling silence descended upon the group, punctuated only by the chirping of crickets. The setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, a stark contrast to the chilling events of the past few days. Despite the lingering fear and confusion, a sense of relief washed over them. They were alive. They were back. They exchanged tentative smiles, the ordeal forging a stronger bond between them. As darkness claimed the sky, they huddled around a smaller, more subdued campfire. The carefree laughter and playful banter were gone, replaced by a quiet camaraderie. The experience had left a permanent mark on them, a shared secret they wouldn't soon forget. Days turned into weeks, then months. The friends tried to resume their normal lives, the memory of the white noise incident a constant shadow. Each tried to make sense of it in their own way. Maya, ever the pragmatist, dismissed it as a bizarre camping trip gone wrong, a combination of exhaustion, dehydration, and possibly some kind of natural phenomenon that caused the hallucinations. Liam, however, couldn't shake off the feeling that it was something more. He became an avid researcher of unexplained phenomena, scouring the internet for accounts of similar occurrences. He found a few scattered stories about people encountering white noise and strange lights, but nothing concrete. Sarah threw herself into her work, seeking solace in the logic and order of science. But even she couldn't deny the chilling reality of their shared experience. Ethan, who had always been the life of the party, became withdrawn and introspective. The encounter left him with a deep-seated fear of the unknown. He avoided camping trips and deserted areas altogether. One seemingly ordinary evening, as they were gathered at Maya's apartment, a familiar sound sent shivers down their spines. A faint, high-pitched whine emanated from a corner of the room. It was barely audible, almost drowned out by the city sounds, but unmistakable to their ears. Their gazes met, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. The white noise was back. This time there was no flickering light, no distorted landscape. They were in their familiar surroundings, yet a cold dread gripped their hearts. The radio on the coffee table sputtered, the dial spinning of its own accord before settling on a dead channel. A white noise, identical to the faint whine, filled the room. This time there was no mistaking it. The friends exchanged a look of horrified understanding. The white noise had found them again, and this time it was closer.
The Hitchhiker's Warning. The sun dipped below the jagged horizon, casting long, skeletal shadows across the desolate highway. Ellen gripped the steering wheel tighter, the air conditioning a stark contrast to the stifling heat that had clung to the car all day. It was a lonely stretch of road, one she rarely took, a shortcut recommended by a malfunctioning GPS on a whim. A figure emerged from the swirling dust in the rear-view mirror. Ellen squinted, her heart stuttering a beat in her chest. A hitchhiker, This wasn't a route known for foot traffic, and the sudden appearance sent a shiver down her spine. He was tall and lean, his face obscured by the wide brim of a battered hat. As she pulled over, a cloud of dust billowed around the car. He approached slowly, his boots crunching on the gravel. "Need a lift?" His voice was rough, weathered like the landscape around them. Ellen hesitated. Every instinct screamed at her to drive away, but the isolation gnawed at her resolve. "Where are you headed?" "Just down the road a few miles," he said vaguely, his gaze flickering to the dashboard. "My truck broke down a ways back." "Truck?" Ellen scanned the desolate landscape. There wasn't another vehicle in sight. Against her better judgment, she sighed. "All right, get in." He climbed into the passenger seat, his clothes caked with dust. The moment the car door slammed shut, the air inside seemed to crackle with an odd tension. "Thanks," he rasped, his eyes finally meeting hers. They were an unsettling shade of blue, almost luminous in the dimming light. "This sure beats walking." "It's not exactly a bustling area," Ellen replied, forcing a smile. She glanced back at the dashboard. "You didn't say how far down the road." "Not far," he repeated, his gaze fixed ahead. "Just past—" He paused, his voice dropping to a low murmur. "The crossroads." Ellen frowned. "The crossroads?" "Yeah," he continued, his grip tightening on the seatbelt. "Be careful there. Real careful." "Why? What's there?" Ellen's unease deepened. His cryptic warning sent shivers down her spine. He didn't answer. Instead, he stared ahead, his jaw clenched. The silence in the car was oppressive, broken only by the rhythmic hum of the engine. Ellen stole another glance at him. His hands were clenched into fists, knuckles white. Minutes stretched into eternity. The sun had completely vanished, leaving the sky awash in vibrant shades of orange and purple. Then, a faint glow appeared on the horizon, a cluster of lights in the distance. "There!" the hitchhiker muttered, his voice barely a whisper. "The crossroads." Ellen squinted. It wasn't a town, just a deserted intersection in the middle of nowhere. 2 crumbling gas stations stood on either side, their windows boarded up, pumps long dry. Yet, an inexplicable chill washed over her. "Shouldn't there be signs?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's nothing here." "There used to be," the hitchhiker said, his voice hollow. "But some things are better left unseen." A sudden gust of wind howled around them, rattling the car windows. Dust devils danced across the empty road, swirling like phantoms. The air grew heavy, thick with an unseen dread. "Pull over!" the hitchhiker hissed, his voice urgent. "Don't drive through!" Fear prickled at Ellen's skin. This was insane. Paranoia fueled by the desolate landscape and his cryptic warning. But a primal fear, a chilling intuition, resonated deep within her. Ignoring the rising panic in her chest, Ellen hesitated. The engine idled, a low hum against the wind. "Just drive!" the hitchhiker's voice exploded, his composure shattering. "Don't let it take you!" The urgency in his voice sent a jolt of terror through her. What's taking me?" Ellen's voice trembled. He reached out, his hand a blur in the fading light, but she flinched, slamming the car into gear. With a panicked screech of tires, she shot past the intersection, leaving the gas stations and the flickering lights behind. She didn't look back. She slammed the gas pedal to the floor, the speedometer climbing like a panicked rabbit. The deserted highway stretched before her, a ribbon of asphalt leading away from the unknown danger. But the encounter continued to haunt her. The hitchhiker's fear, the desolate crossroads, the unseen threat, it all gnawed at the edges of her sanity. Every bump in the road, every flicker of light in the rearview mirror sent her heart racing. She drove for what felt like hours, the desolate landscape a blur outside the window. Eventually, Exhaustion started to pull at her eyelids. The adrenaline surge was fading, replaced by a bone-deep weariness. Reaching the next town, a small, sleepy place with a single blinking motel sign, she pulled over with a shaky breath. Rushing into the lobby, she practically threw money at the startled clerk for a room. Locked inside, safe and sound, or so she hoped, she finally allowed herself to fall apart. The fear came crashing down in waves, leaving her trembling. She tried to rationalize the encounter, to explain it away as a crazy desert hermit ranting about nothing. But the raw terror in his eyes couldn't be easily dismissed. Sleep eluded her. Every creak of the old building sounded like approaching footsteps. The shadows cast by the single bedside lamp seemed to morph into menacing shapes. Finally, as dawn painted the sky in soft hues of pink and orange, she drifted off, only to be plagued by nightmares of the crossroads and the unseen danger that lurked there. The next morning, fueled by a mix of fear and morbid curiosity, she decided to investigate. Armed with a thermos of strong coffee and a battered map, she retraced her journey. As she neared the crossroads, the familiar unease crawled under her skin. The desolation felt intensified, the silence deeper. Pulling over a safe distance away, she trained her binoculars on the deserted intersection. The gas stations looked even more dilapidated in the daylight, windows boarded up, paint peeling like scabs. There were no signs, no markings on the road, nothing to explain the hitchhiker's fear. But as she zoomed in on one of the gas pumps at the abandoned station on the left, a jolt of adrenaline shot through her. Carved into the rusted metal was a single word: beware. The hair on her arms stood on end. This wasn't a coincidence. The hitchhiker's warning, the chilling atmosphere, it was all real. Suddenly a movement caught her eye. A flicker of light at the edge of the station on the right. She adjusted the binoculars, her breath catching in her throat. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall and slender, shrouded in a tattered cloak, its face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. The figure moved with a strange fluidity, seemingly gliding across the cracked pavement. Fear choked her. It was the hitchhiker. But something was different. This figure seemed wrong, ethereal, its form shimmering slightly in the heat haze. As it turned slightly, a flash of light caught off something in its hand. Not flesh, not bone, but something metallic, smooth and reflective. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Then, as abruptly as it appeared, the figure vanished back into the shadows of the gas station. Ellen slammed shut the binoculars, collapsing back against the seat. She couldn't explain what she saw, but the terror was paralyzing. She knew she couldn't stay. There was something undeniably evil about the crossroads, something that chilled her to the core. With shaking hands, she started the car and sped away, leaving the enigmatic gas stations and the lurking entity behind. The incident left a permanent mark on Ellen's soul. The unexplained encounter, the terror, the lingering sense of unease, it all refused to fade. She couldn't tell anyone what she saw, not without being dismissed as crazy. But whenever she drove a deserted stretch of road, whenever an unexpected hitchhiker emerged from the shadows, she couldn't help but glance back, half expecting to see the shimmering figure and the menacing glint in its unseen hand. The crossroads remained a mystery, a chilling reminder of the unseen dangers that lurked beyond the veil of normality. And the hitchhiker's warning echoed in the back of her mind, a constant reminder: some things are better left unseen.
If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more like it, hit that subscribe button and bell. We'd also love to hear from you in the comments below. What story resonated most with you, and how did it make you feel?